The AVSA Library Committee is pleased to present this educational video of a walkthrough of the Design Division of the 2016 AVSA National Show in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is Part 1, the Interpretive Plant Arrangements, designs in which an entire African violet plant is used. Following the judging of the show, Paul Kroll and B.J. Ohme, both nationally recognized designers and judges, provided a recorded walkthrough and critique of the Design Division. Their diplomatic comments are intended to be an instructional and educational tool to teach design concepts and techniques to our viewers. For viewers' convenience, the design walkthrough video is divided into 3 segments: interpretive plant arrangements, interpretive flower arrangements, and container gardens.
Okay, so welcome to the 2016 AVSA National Convention in Albuquerque. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Kroll and Mr. B.J. Ohme, who are going to be going through the Design Division again with us and giving us some good, important critiques and comments on the design entries this year. So welcome, Paul, and welcome, B.J., and thank you very much for taking the time to do this with me.
You're welcome.
And so who's going to start us out and tell me what we're doing today?
Well, I'll start by saying that this is not intended to be a post-mortem on the judging, nor is it intended to disparage any of the designers. It's a critique on the designs themselves so that other people can learn from it to do more with their designs and how to execute them according to the schedule. Great,
thank you. So tell me what we're starting off with on this design and what category we've got.
Okay, this is interpretive plant arrangements, which requires an African violet, at least one African violet plant taken out of its pot and used in a niche, whatever size it is. So here, in this first design, the exhibitor chose to use the line material coming up and down with smoke from the airplanes, exhaust from the airplanes, and little airplanes on the ends of each. They're small, kind of inconspicuous.
I would like to make a comment on this one, how the designer has chose the color of the backdrop to complement the African violet. The African violet is still the focal point, but the backdrop really makes the African violet stand out. Where we get down to some of the other ones farther down the line, we'll point out to maybe where the backdrop wasn't as compatible as maybe it could have been to make the African violet plant or the blossoms really stand out. But this exhibitor did a really good job of choosing that.
This design is entitled Ristra. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Red chili strung and usually hung outside a building to dry in the fall. It's supposed to be an arrangement featuring red blooms on the plant. And here the exhibitor has chosen to actually use dried red chili peppers and red blooms on the plant. Having the design itself be off to the side enhances the overall line and going through the design. No backdrop is necessary because there's enough color and enough contrast there.
This next one was actually the best in the class. I really liked how the designer didn't interpret the class literally, but more subtly, and used the garlic instead of the hot peppers. The garlic still giving the interpretation of something hot.
Here the exhibitor chose to have the design hanging from the back of the niche, which is acceptable. Any design has to be anchored somewhere, but it doesn't have to be the bottom. It can be the back of the niche, it can be from the side of the niche, suspended over the top.
That's really interesting because I never knew about the anchoring from somewhere else other than the bottom, so thank you very much for that.
have two more entries in this class. This one was very dramatic with a black. The exhibitor chose to bring his or her own foam board to line the niche and bring it fully out the sides. This is not normal, but if it doesn't say anything against that in the schedule, then there's no reason you can't do it. It's very dramatic with the rust-colored leaves and dried material there, the red bloom on the plant. When we went through this before, we were both saying that we wished it could have been a better quality plant, and perhaps if the plant had been tilted forward so that you'd be looking straight onto the plant as opposed to the way the plant is situated.
I think this is also an example of maybe where the backdrop could have been in a little bit of a lighter color to really make the actual arrangement pop. That this designer has done a really good job of. I think sometimes designers think that their line has to either be straight up and down or diagonal, and that's not necessarily the case. This designer has, more than one line coming through, and that gives a lot of movement and depth to the arrangement.
And the last design in this class is done with some driftwood, the plant, which is situated nicely to the front, and the chili peppers are added there. I always think that when you look at a design or situate it, it helps a lot to add depth to the design if you turn it slightly. This design is quite straight on, and I'm going to do something here and see what you think.
Wow.
See how it changes the perspective of the design? Now that's the exhibitor's prerogative, and again, I don't mean to remake the design, but there are several designs in this section as we go along where I think the design would have been much more attractive and or appealing and dramatic if the design had been turned slightly.
So a little bit of advice for designers might be, once you have set or positioned your design, to maybe just do a little bit of rotation either way, maybe photograph it, look at it yourself, critique it a couple of times, and get an additional opinion of different views and see what you like best.
Absolutely. And also step back. After you think you're finished with the design, don't look at it from 2 feet in front of it, but step back 8 feet or 10 feet and get that perspective too.
I just thought of something we should say here. This may be may have caused some confusion to the viewers of this video when you look at it. There's a big rosette laying here. The design next to it was best in class. This rosette represents sweepstakes in design, and they laid it at this design because this exhibitor won the sweepstakes.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, the next class is entitled Loretto Chapel, known for its miraculous spiral staircase. Originally built as Our Lady of Light Chapel on the convent of the Sisters of Loretto, staged in a white niche. This is 24 high, 20 wide, and 16 deep. This, to us, was a very heavy design, and the exhibitor chose to use this container, I think because it's spiral. It's dramatic. Might be a little heavy down here. The line goes down. I think it's also a little bit far forward. There is room to move it back a little bit in the niche, and again, perhaps turn it a bit so the violet isn't right in your face.
Right, I agree with that. The designer has also done, though, a good job of making the backdrop complement the blossom and the other components. It really stands out to you. It's not lost, which is important.
I'm not sure if this will come through in the video, but I believe it's Harry Lauder's walking stick in the back, is painted dark blue against the light blue background. So it's not black. I'm not sure if it'll come through as black.
That is a nice touch.
This is, yes, this is also the chapel in the same class. Apparently the exhibitor wanted to focus on the spiritual aspects of the lace and the flowers, and maybe 3 up for...
I believe the spiral staircase in the design that the designers were supposed to interpret are a white staircase,
I see.
which is what the designer has done for their interpretation here. One thing I would like to point out too about this design is how the designer has the plant up off of the ground. Too many times we see arrangements where they have the plant resting, actually on the surface of the underlay, which makes it look very bottom heavy. This is a pretty large plant, but it's a large niche, and this designer has brought the plant up into the middle part of the niche, which is important.
This next design, again, is heavy, but it is a large niche, and this is not wire, but I think a reed type material. I can't remember the exact name of it, but has interpreted the spirals with that. And here, unfortunately, the larger plant seems to have suffered some shock in some way or another, and the blossoms are wilting, but they still look okay now. Nice color contrasts, nicely blended.
And this would probably be a perfect example of where you say, do not put a non-show worthy plant in your design,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Right, and that's right.
Another entry in this same class, and here's talking about a non-show worthy plant. A plant used in a design doesn't necessarily have to be a blue.
Okay.
The exhibitor chose to use a glass container at the bottom, which makes the plant and the whole arrangement a bit lighter than if the pedestal here had been solid colored. It's a nice touch, and the line goes right down through to the bottom. The spiral gold is interpreting. I'm not sure about the gold dots on the leaves, but it's a nice touch if that's what the exhibitor wanted.
We had walked through these earlier, and this was the case where this exhibit actually won the best in the class, where we said less is more. They've got the components in there, they've got the interpretation in there, but it's, very light. It's not real heavy.
The next entry is one where the exhibitor chose to have it be suspended, and I think the white transitional material here is the gives the idea of the spirals. I'm not sure the significance of using 2 different colored plants. You can use 1 or more blooming African violet plants according to your schedule. Again, a very dramatic interpretation with the black background.
Right, and this is another example of using lots of different line, whereas the exhibitor has the curved crescent lines and the other lines here. I agree with Paul. I think the use of 2 different colors of blossoms is almost distracting a little bit. Maybe just one plant.
One little faux pas here. The designer pointed out to us that we forgot to cut this wire off at the top, and that sort of, if you notice it, it detracts. But it's just one of those things that sometimes we forget to do.
So in other words, pay attention to your mechanics.
Yes.
Correct.
This design is lovely and green. It pops from the background. The exhibitor's chosen to use no backdrop or underlay, which is fine. There's a white spiral that goes down through, almost invisible, but suggests the spiral staircase. I happened to be here yesterday when this designer was agonizing over the fact that her design did not fill the niche enough. We like to see the niche filled to 7/8 of its height and not be something low. So one of the other designers loaned her a black wooden block to put underneath to raise the design up, which helped immensely. Really made a big difference.
And this is also an example of, I think some designers might think you couldn't use a white blossomed plant with a white backdrop. This designer has done a really good job of using greenery to showcase the plant and the blossoms, and in this case it works fine. It's not lost in that backdrop.
Okay, this is the last entry in the class of the spiral staircase. The exhibitor has chosen to use Ting Ting. It's the white swirly reed that's been painted and has glitter on it to interpret the spiral staircase. And here again is another shining example, I think, of a design that would be changed dramatically if it were moved a bit. I'm going to do that just to show you. It adds depth to the design by making the line come out towards the front, and it just makes it so much more appealing rather than just flat on.
That's right. This designer had the line of their design and had good movement. It was just the plant was slightly too small for this size of a niche. And it could have been more. This would have been an example of a larger plant, and then like the blocks over on the one that we just looked at, something to raise it up to get that plant off of the tabletop and get that more into the middle of the niche.
Keep in mind that what we're suggesting is, again, our opinions, and perhaps the exhibitor wanted this design to be flat on, front forward, without being turned, but it's just something that adds perspective.
But let me also add, these are the opinions of very well-seasoned designers, and so I'm going to say, heed their advice, designers.
Pardon. This is Scandia Peak Tramway, and it's another interpretive plant arrangement. And we have 3 entries here. The one on the left was the winner of the Best in the Design section today, and is a very intriguing piece of wood. I think it's manzanita wood, I'm not sure. And nicely placed small blossom or plants, and the whole thing just ties together very nicely.
And I noticed that this is also set on an angle on the table.
Yes.
Like you suggest.
Just a bit of greenery here and there, and as a transitional material, but beautifully done. This is a very nice piece of wood, and it was the exhibitor chose to use some textured leaves and things there, quite nice. The plant is at kind of a precarious angle, but it fits with the piece of wood.
It really does. This is an example too where the exhibitor has used an accessory, but they've used it in a way that it's very subtle. It doesn't stick out at you. It blends in with the design, and that's okay.
The third entry in this class is a bit heavy. I should have mentioned earlier, this was to be a freestanding design as opposed to one in a niche. So the juniper that's used here for the height is perhaps a bit heavy, and the plant a little bit light. It sort of is lost in the design.
Right. This particular design, I think, would have benefited from maybe only using one branch instead of 2, maybe having a little larger plant with more blossoms. But then the line is almost lost on this one with the two branches versus just maybe having one one branch.
And would you mind reading the judge's comments on this since it got a red ribbon?
Captures the essence of nature overall, but could be improved to enhance rhythm.
Which goes along with what you were saying about the line, BJ.
Right.
Thank you.